was actually pre-recorded. I just want to let you know there will be some flipping of screens, but want to welcome you. And so we're going to play the video and welcome you to team building. The Micro-Learning Project is a virtual training environment that empowers you to make new connections, to discover and rediscover new skills, and to enhance your overall knowledge. So I'm really excited that on today, day 3, we're going to talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And the 5 dysfunctions of a team are highlighted in a book that is written by Patrick Lencioni. And so before we get started, I have a few questions I'd like you to answer through the Mentimeter. So the code for these questions are 154995. And so the first question that we have is, do your team members openly and readily disclose their opinions? Okay, very good. Next question is, are your team meetings compelling and productive? All right. The next question is, does your team come to decisions quickly and avoid getting bogged down in consensus? Very nice. All right, the next one. Do your team members confront one another about their shortcomings? Okay, thank you. And the last question, do your team members sacrifice their own interests for the good of the team? Okay, an equal balance there. All right. Thank you so much for participating in the survey. And now we're just going to return to the video. Your team is actually just, oops, sorry. So according to Patrick Lencioni, these are the questions that you should be asking to determine whether or not your team is actually dysfunctional. And we're going to talk about his 5 dysfunctions. The first dysfunction is the absence of trust. The second dysfunction is fear of conflict. The third dysfunction is lack of commitment. The fourth dysfunction is avoidance of accountability. And the last dysfunction is inattention to results. You should find many of these interesting because for those of you who have been participating in the Micro-Learning Project, on the first week, Rose talked a lot about relationships and connections and trust. When Ashley spoke about emotional intelligence, it was one's ability to make good decisions based on their understanding of the environment, their teams, and themselves. And when Kate spoke about healthy dialogue, it was about creating the environment where you could manage conflict. And so the Micro-Learning Project the last 3 weeks have set you up for success so that as you start to look at your teams, you can apply what you learned from those sessions into this discussion. And so we will further break down the 5 dysfunctions of the team, and I will share with you what the issue is and then what the solution is according to Patrick Lencioni. One statement I put in the slide that is really important, which goes back to my first day teaching this team building course, is about the importance of culture. And as you can see, the slide is entitled Habits Become Culture. This is so important because you must create a culture where trust exists. And so Lencioni gives the definition of what he means in this, is that team members become reluctant to be vulnerable with one another, and they're unwilling to admit their mistakes and their weaknesses or to ask for help. And so when team members get to this place, it is most difficult to shift them. The other thing about what this actual definition means is we think about the impact of different people from different backgrounds and different generations and different cultures. And so if people don't feel that their background, their culture is actually valued or respected, they won't trust you at all. But Lencioni goes on to provide all of us some recommendations or solutions to address this trust issue. And if you combine them with what you heard from Rose on Monday, I think it will help you set the stage for what you need to do. He recommends that you set a good example as a leader by asking for help from your team, right? Admitting your own mistakes and weaknesses and limitations, and being the first to own up to anything that transpires. Because a leader who can actually share their mistakes and their concerns is a leader who people say, you may be a superhero, but you're actually still human. And so this is important that they know that they can make a mistake, they can have an error, that things are not always going to work out, but they're going to trust and believe that you as a leader and other team members are there to support them. The second one is a fear of culture. The definition for this is that team members are reluctant to be vulnerable, and then they're unwilling to admit the mistakes as a result of that. And so Lencioni recommends that you establish that conflict is welcome and purposeful, that it matters, that it makes a difference, that we all understand what it means, that you define what a healthy conflict looks like. And as Kate mentioned in her presentation on healthy dialogue, in order to have that, you need to be clear about the conflict and clear about the conversation. But in this sense, you actually praise people for being comfortable enough to admit that they're in conflict, to being comfortable enough to speak up about what that conflict is. And one of the things I think is really exciting about his reference toward fear of conflict is that he actually calls it mining for conflict. This means that you toss out a bad idea to see if anyone will agree with you just because they want to avoid conflict. And that's your way as a leader of testing where people are and how comfortable they are. And if you notice that they're not responding differently or they're not saying something is wrong, then you know your work environment is not a safe place for which people feel like they can address conflict. And so we would encourage you to look at some of our classes and go more in depth in healthy dialogue and emotional intelligence and trust to help people build that level of confidence. The next one in his list is a lack of commitment. So his definition says that without conflict, it is difficult for team members to commit to decisions, creating an environment where ambiguity prevails. And then a lack of direction and commitment can make employees, particularly those who are star employees, you can make them disgruntled. And so Lencioni suggests the following, that you always have clarity and closure, that you set clear deadlines and review the decisions, particularly at the end of every meeting. What did we say? Who agreed to do what? What's the timeline and the expectation? So everyone is actually clear. And you should make sure that what you're communicating to your staff is stuff that you want to get out and clearly say it should be out in the public, or communicate the stuff that you can share with your leadership team is not stuff that should be communicated to the public. And so what this means is that there may be data that is not necessary for everyone to hear right now, or there's not an explanation or clarity to do it. And so you want to make sure that people have committed to doing what they said they were going to do so that you can hold them accountable. All of us are very much aware of those times where people get a message, they say yes, and they walk out of the room, and then they have a conversation opposite of what was actually said. So unless people have the ability to say they agree or disagree, then their commitment to what you're asking them to do is probably not really there. And so your lack of awareness of that is going to cause more dysfunction. The next one is avoidance of team accountability. And this one talks about setting a good example for your team members and admitting weaknesses and mistakes, and that you have to own up to what you did and why it went wrong. And so Lencioni says for this one that you want to establish what accountability looks like. You want to define who does what by when. You want to be clear about the repercussions of not living up to that accountability. You want to ensure that each of the team members has the ability to hold each other accountable. So whether the leader is present or not, there are some rules behind what accountability means and how you will engage in a conversation when people are not accountable. Really critical to make sure people are clear about their roles and responsibilities. This is also important because when you get to the end of the year and you're talking about performance assessments, holding people accountable before you get to a performance assessment is really easier by the time you get to a performance assessment. And the last one is inattention to results. Honestly, we're all individuals, and so every once in a while our team members may put their own needs above the team, whether it's their ego, they're looking for career recognition or development. And so putting those ahead of all the team makes the team impacted. And so the recommendation is that one, that you hold people accountable. You remind them of the commitment that was made to the team. You ensure that they understand that people are counting on them. You are clear about people are trusting them and that they are actually accountable for the results that they said they were going to do. And so you also make clear the difference between an individual goal and a team goal. And clarity around all of those actually will make a difference. It's so important when you think about what causes team dysfunction that you spend the time to get really clear with yourself and with your team about what the culture is that you want to create. And if you want to avoid these dysfunctions, you need to be clear about those questions we started off with and where your answers are. And you need to be clear about each member's ability to commit to the team. And if they can't commit to the team and the goals, you as a leader need to ask them why. And so in summary for this discussion today, we really want to make sure you're aware of the 5 dysfunctions, that you're clear about the questions that you should be asking, and that you're clear that there are solutions to each of them. And the most critical solution as a leader is that you're willing to engage in the conversation. They may be difficult and challenging, but to get to a place of ensuring that your dysfunction is minimized to create outstanding organizational health, it is very important that you are clear about these dysfunctions and you put the tools in place that will actually make a difference. Okay. So on behalf of the team, we thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed the session. There'll be information in your screen to help you. Sorry about that. Information on your screen to help you eliminate your, to respond back to us. So thank you so much and apologize for the background noise. Have a good day.